He had it all: the money, the power, the sneer in his eyes. An arrogant heir who treated life like his own private racetrack, never caring who he left in the dust. She had nothing to lose, having built her life from grease, sweat, and a strength he could never comprehend. Their story should have ended years ago in a high school hallway where he humiliated her. But destiny? Well, it has a wickedly ironic sense of humor. In one fiery night, his world of luxury became a twisted wreck of metal and flames. A brutal car crash that left him clinging to life. And just when all hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the shadows to save him. Not a guardian angel. A mechanic. Her. Have you ever felt completely invisible to someone who holds all the power? This story is for you. It's about the moment the tables don't just turn thee, flip so spectacularly it feels scripted by the gods of revenge and true love. This isn't just a story about a broken car. It's about a broken rich man and an unbreakable poor woman and a secret past that's about to explode. Their journey will be an emotional roller coaster, filled with shocking plot twists, betrayals, and a desperate search for redemption. This is their unlikely love story. Get ready, because this isn't a simple romance. It's a life-changing collision of worlds that will prove that the greatest second chance can begin at rock bottom when he becomes her direct rival. So, if you believe that destiny has a plan for all of us and that true love can be forged in fire, you've found your home. Comment Revel below if you're ready for the drama. Smash that like button as a sign that you're rooting for a second chance. And subscribe so you don't miss a second of this life-changing journey. The screech of tires was the last sound of his old life, a final, arrogant protest before the world dissolved into a symphony of destruction. Earl Chambers, the quintessential arrogant heir, had pushed his luck one too many times, and the custom-built supercar responded by redecorating the midnight highway with its own fiery guts. Twisted metal groaned around him, a cage he had built for himself with speed and indifference. This was the ultimate drama, a brutal, instantaneous fall from grace. He coughed, the acrid smoke of his own failure filling his lungs. For the first time in his pampered existence, money was useless, his name was meaningless, and his charm was certainly not going to bend steel. This visceral car crash wasn't just an accident, it felt like a reckoning, a final violent stop to a life lived without brakes. The silence that followed the chaos was more terrifying than the noise itself, a profound and absolute emptiness he had never known. Then, a silhouette appeared against the flames, a figure moving with a calm purpose that seemed alien in this hellscape. It wasn't the flashing lights of an ambulance he had expected, but a lone figure with a toolkit, a shadow of competence in his world of chaos. This was not the kind of help a man like Earl Chambers was used to summoning. This felt different. This felt like destiny itself walking toward him, emerging from the heart of his self-made inferno. With a strength that belied her frame, she went to work, prying open the crushed door with a crowbar and a series of practiced, efficient movements. He watched, dazed, as this stranger, this woman, this mechanic, dismantled his prison piece by piece. She didn't speak, her focus absolute, her hands sure and steady. It was a shocking display of grace under pressure, something he knew nothing about, an expertise born from a world entirely foreign to his own. She pulled him from the wreckage, her grip firm on his arm, dragging him to a safe distance, just as the fuel tank gave way in a final concussive roar. He lay on the asphalt, the heat of the fire on his face, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was a life-changing moment, the brutal and undeniable end of his invincibility. He was alive because of her, a debt he couldn't immediately quantify or dismiss, and that fact alone was unsettling. He finally got a clear look at her face in the flickering firelight, her features smudged with soot, her eyes holding a storm of emotions he couldn't decipher. She was just a mechanic, a random face in the night, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident. A strange sense of unease began to crawl under his skin. a feeling that this rescue was only the beginning of a much more complicated love story than he could ever anticipate. As he lay there, a crack appeared in the armor of his pride, the first of its kind. The raw, terrifying proximity to death had momentarily stripped him of his title, his inheritance, his very name. He was just a man saved by a woman. This simple, undeniable fact was a foreign concept, and it planted a seed of profound confusion in his mind, a question about the true nature of power and worth that had never occurred to him before. The initial wave of shock and gratitude receded, and in its place, the familiar tide of arrogance began to rise. Earl Chambers, propped against a guardrail, reverted to his factory settings. He saw not a savior, but a service provider. He pulled out his wallet, the leather soft and grotesquely expensive against the grime of the night. This was a classic rich man, poor woman scenario in his mind, and he knew exactly how to play his part in this unfolding drama. He scribbled on a blank check, his hand still shaking slightly, and held it out to her. "Name your price," he said, his voice dripping with the condescending charm that had opened every door in his life. "For the tow, the trouble, whatever. Just fill it in." He didn't see the woman who saved his life. He saw a problem that money could make disappear, completely unaware of their secret past and the gravity of his mistake. For Brenda McDonald, time seemed to freeze. That voice, that casual dismissal. It was older, deeper, but it was the same one that had echoed in her worst memories for a decade. She looked at Himmerly, looked at Hyman, saw the boy who had led the laughter that had humiliated her so cruelly, shed almost broken. The check in his hand wasn't a payment, it was a repeat offense, a confirmation that he hadn't changed at all, not one bit. Her expression hardened, the calm competence from moments ago replaced by a glacial fury. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. The universe, in its infinite and cruel wisdom, had delivered her childhood tormentor, bleeding and broken, right to her feet. The desire for revenge was a bitter, satisfying taste in her mouth. This was a second chance she never knew she wanted, a surprise gift from a spiteful destiny. With a quiet intensity that was more intimidating than any shout, she slapped the check from his hand. It fluttered to the ground like a dead leaf. "My services aren't for sale," she stated, her voice level and sharp. "Especially not to you, Earl." The flicker of recognition in his eyes was her first victory. The look on his face was a delicious cocktail of confusion and a truly shocking sense of disbelief. He was speechless, a truly rare event. This tough, capable mechanic was the same girl had tormented. It was a plot twist his privileged mind couldn't process. She turned her back on him, leaving him there with his money on the dirty asphalt. And for the first time, Earl Chambers felt something other than power. He felt small. The hero of his own story had just been cast as the villain in hers. The memory hit Brenda with the force of a physical blow. The hallway, the spilled books, his mocking laughter as his friends joined in. He had called her Grease Monkey Brenda in front of everyone, a nickname meant to shame her for her family's working-class roots. That moment had fueled her ambition, hardening her resolve to build a life he could never touch or tarnish. And now he had just handed her the keys to his undoing. Earl's world was one of polished surfaces and hollow echoes. His penthouse apartment overlooked a city that felt like his personal kingdom, yet it was a fortress of solitude. Days were filled with meaningless board meetings for his father's company, where he feigned interest, and nights were spent at exclusive clubs, surrounded by people who loved his name, not him. It was a life of empty luxury, a gilded cage he rattled around in, a constant, low-level drama. His morning routine was a sterile ritual. A silent valet would lay out an expensive suit while he drank an espresso made by a machine that cost more than most people's cars. He would scan the financial news on a tablet, his interactions limited to curt nods and dismissive gestures. His world was frictionless, sanitized, and utterly devoid of genuine human connection. This was the insulated reality of the rich man, a world away from real struggle. After the accident, the emptiness felt more pronounced. The sympathy from his high society friends was as fake as their tans. They saw the car crash as a bit of exciting gossip, a story to be told at their next brunch. No one asked if he was okay, not really. They just asked about the car. The experience had been life-changing, yet he had returned to a life that refused to change at all, a fact that was beginning to dawn on him. He found himself staring out his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights blurring into a meaningless pattern. He had everything a man could want, but the image that kept replaying in his mind wasn't of champagne flutes or sports cars. It was the face of a woman, covered in soot, looking at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. It was the face of Brenda McDonald, the ghost from his secret past. Meanwhile, Brenda's world smelled of motor oil, hot coffee, and hard-won success. The garage she owned, McDonald Motors, was her sanctuary, a place she had built from nothing but a small loan and a mountain of determination. It wasn't just a business, it was a community hub, a testament to her passion and grit. Here, in this haven of steel and concrete, she was the one with all the power, a queen in her own kingdom. Her morning began before sunrise with the rumble of an engine she was tuning herself. Coffee was brewed in a simple pot, shared with her crew as they discussed the day's jobs. Her hands, often stained with grease by 7 a.m., were the source of her pride and her livelihood. Her world was tangible, loud, and full of purpose. This was the reality of the poor woman who had made herself rich in ways Earl couldn't comprehend. The stark contrast between their lives was a chasm waiting to be explored. While Earl was shielded from every inconvenience, Brenda faced challenges hidden, her resilience forged in the fires of necessity. His wealth was a cushion that softened reality, hers was a tool she had built from scratch. A collision between these two worlds was not just inevitable, it was a necessary catalyst for the emotional journey that was about to unfold. Forced by necessity and a humiliating lack of options, Earl had to visit her garage. His replacement luxury car felt obscene parked next to the modest, hard-working vehicles that filled her lot. He stepped out of his car, dressed in a designer suit that screamed out of place, and walked into her world. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and the sound of pneumatic wrenches, a symphony of labor had never known. This was an entirely new kind of drama for him. He watched her, expecting to find some flaw, some corner cut that he could use to reassert his superiority. Instead, he was stunned. Brenda moved with an expert's grace, orchestrating the work in her garage like a conductor. She wasn't just a mechanic, she was an artist and a general. Her knowledge of complex engines was nothing short of shocking, and her team looked at her with a respect he'd only ever seen bought, never earned. He tried to assert himself, suggesting a faster, cheaper, but lower quality part to speed up the extensive repairs on his wrecked supercar. "I don't care about the cost, I care about the time," he said dismissively. Brenda wiped her hands on a rag, her green eyes fixing on him with an unnerving intensity. "I do things the right way, or I don't do them at all," she said flatly, challenging his core belief that money could bend any rule to its will. Her integrity was a brick wall his privilege couldn't break through. Every interaction in her domain chipped away at his armor. He saw her refuse to overcharge an elderly woman for a minor repair, and then watched her patiently teach a young apprentice how to diagnose a tricky electrical issue. This was a world built on trust and skill, currencies he had never bothered to acquire. It was a profoundly emotional and unsettling experience on his road to redemption. He felt a grudging admiration bloom in his chest, an unfamiliar and unwelcome sensation. This woman, whom he had once dismissed and humiliated, was more of a leader than anyone he knew in his father's boardroom. Her refusal to compromise, her absolute commitment to quality, was a quiet indictment of his entire way of life. He came to her garage to be a customer, but he was quickly becoming a student of a life he never knew existed. As the days passed, his visits became less about checking on the car and more about watching her. He was witnessing the source of her strength, the passion that fueled her. This garage wasn't just where she worked, it was who she was. And Earl Chambers, the arrogant heir who thought he had the world figured out, was beginning to realize he didn't know anything at all. This was a truly life-changing realization for him. One afternoon, seeking refuge from his own awkwardness, he struck up a conversation with an old-timer on Brenda's crew. He asked a simple, condescending question about a piece of equipment, and the mechanic, without a hint of judgment, spent 10 minutes explaining its function with genuine passion. It was a simple, human interaction, devoid of agenda or status, and it left Earl feeling both humbled and strangely comforted. News of the arrogant heir spending his days at a working-class garage traveled fast in his gilded social circles. It reached the ears of Marcus Thorne, a man whose family was as rich as Earl's, but whose character was bankrupt. Marcus had always been a bitter rival, constantly competing with Earl for deals, status, and attention. Seeing Earl's strange new fascination with a grease monkey presented an opportunity too delicious to pass up for a bit of drama. Marcus seethed with a deep-seated jealousy. He saw Earl's dalliance not as a genuine change, but as another effortless whim, another way Earl managed to be the center of attention without even trying. He believed Earl's life was a series of unearned victories, and he was determined to orchestrate his downfall. Humiliating Earl by exposing his new pet project in the mechanic behind Ida's, a fraud seemed like the perfect form of poetic revenge. Believing he could knock Earl down a peg, Marcus devised a plan. He paid a disgruntled former employee of one of Brenda's suppliers to subtly tamper with a critical, high-performance part destined for Earl's car. It was a clever act of sabotage, one that would appear to be incompetence on Brenda's part, causing the engine to fail spectacularly upon its first test run. This was his shocking move. The part arrived, and Brenda, with her meticulous eye, began the installation. But something felt off. A slight imbalance, a microscopic imperfection that 99 out of 100 mechanics would have missed. Trusting her gut over the manufacturer's seal of approval, she stopped all work. This was her reputation on the line, and she trusted no one more than her own instincts. This was a surprise she was determined to unravel. Instead of installing it, she ran a series of deep diagnostics, using custom tools she had built herself. Earl, watching from a distance, grew impatient. "What's the holdup?" he demanded. "It's a brand new part." Brenda ignored him, her focus absolute. After an hour of intense work, she found it a hairline fracture, intentionally placed to fail under pressure. A discovery that could have destroyed her business. But Brenda's cleverness went beyond diagnostics. She traced the part's serial number back through a series of shell companies, a digital trail that Marcus thought was untraceable. With a few calls to old contacts in the supply chain, she didn't just expose the flaw, she exposed the plot. She presented the evidence to Earl not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. This was a plot twist he never saw coming. Earl was stunned, then furious, but mostly he was impressed. She hadn't just fixed a problem, she had outsmarted a snake from his own world. She had protected her integrity and his investment with a skill that was surgical. His admiration for her deepened, solidifying into a hard, undeniable respect. His quest for redemption had to begin with acknowledging he was in the presence of someone far stronger than himself, a true partner in this unexpected romance. A shift occurred in Earl after the sabotage incident. His visits to the garage were no longer a matter of obligation, they became the focal point of his day. He'd show up with coffee for her crew, using the excuse of checking the progress, but he'd stay for hours, leaning against a workbench, simply watching. He was drawn to Brenda's authenticity like a moth to a flame, a stark contrast to the superficiality he was used to in his world of constant drama. He saw the kindness she showed her community, a quiet generosity that asked for nothing in return. She'd let a single mom pay for a transmission repair in installments, no questions asked. She sponsored the local kids' baseball team, their logo proudly displayed on a banner in the garage. This wasn't charity for show, it was a genuine connection to the people around her. It was a form of wealth he was only now beginning to understand. One afternoon, he watched as a young boy came into the garage, upset because the chain on his bicycle had broken. Every mechanic was swamped with work. Brenda, seeing the boy's distress, stopped what she was doing on a complex engine rebuild, knelt and fixed the bicycle chain in under 5 minutes. She sent the boy on his way with a smile and a pat on the head, asking for nothing in return. This small act was profoundly emotional for Earl to witness. This was the start of a quiet, unspoken romance. It wasn't in grand gestures, but in small moments, in the way he'd clear a workspace for her without being asked, or the way she'd crack a small, rare smile when he made a self-deprecating joke. He was seeing the woman behind the tough exterior, and she was seeing a glimmer of the man he could be beneath the layers of arrogance. It felt like destiny was slowly, carefully pushing them closer. He started to feel more at home in the noisy, chaotic garage than he ever did in his silent, sterile penthouse. He learned the names of her crew, listened to their stories, and even picked up a wrench once or twice, only to be gently teased by Brenda for holding it upside down. He was a tourist in the world of hard work, but for the first time, he wanted to be a citizen. This was a life-changing transformation on his road to redemption. Their strange friendship became a source of gossip in two different worlds. His friends mocked the arrogant heir for slumming it, while her crew watched with a protective curiosity. But in the bubble of the garage, none of that mattered. What mattered was the growing respect and the undeniable spark between them, the hope of a second chance at a first impression, and the beginning of a true love story. He was beginning to realize that his entire life had been a pursuit of things that didn't matter. Brenda, with her unwavering integrity and quiet strength, represented something real, something worth fighting for. His journey toward a better self was no longer just about atoning for his past mistakes. It was about building a future worthy of her. And that was a far more terrifying and exhilarating prospect. The weight of his past actions, both recent and from their secret past, grew heavier on Earl each day. He knew he couldn't move forward without addressing it. One evening, as Brenda was closing up the shop, he finally worked up the nerve. "Brenda," he started, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I need to apologize for how I acted after the crash, and for before, in high school. I was an arrogant kid. I was cruel." It was a clumsy apology, but it was sincere. He looked at her, his eyes pleading for a sign of forgiveness, a chance to wipe the slate clean. He half expected her to mock him, or to throw the words back in his face. He was the rich man, used to getting what he wanted, but in this emotional moment, he was completely at her mercy. He wanted this second chance more than anything, a real shot at redemption. Brenda listened, her expression unreadable as she wiped down a countertop. She didn't dismiss his apology, but she didn't accept it either. "Words are easy, Earl," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You think because you've spent a few weeks in the real world, it erases who you were, who you are." She turned to face him fully. "I can't be won over by your newfound humility. I need to see that it's real." Her words were a clear challenge. She was making it painfully obvious that his wealth and status meant less than nothing to her. They were liabilities, not assets. To earn her trust, he would have to do more than just say sorry. He would have to prove he had fundamentally changed. It was a test, and the stakes were her respect, which he was beginning to value more than his entire inheritance. This personal drama was his alone to navigate. He was momentarily frustrated, the old part of him wanting to argue that he was trying. But he swallowed his pride. He knew she was right. He had spent a lifetime believing his name and money were enough. Brenda McDonald was the first person to demand more. She demanded character, and he wasn't sure he had any to offer. The boy who had humiliated her had a long way to go to earn forgiveness. "Okay," he said, nodding slowly. "Okay, Brenda. I understand." He didn't push. He didn't argue. He simply accepted her terms. It was a small moment, but a significant one. It was the first time he had ever truly been put in his place and hadn't fought back. He just stood there, ready to do whatever it took to prove that this was a life-changing turning point for him, not just a fleeting phase. After she left, he remained in the quiet garage for a long time, the scent of oil and metal his only company. The echo of her words, "I need to see that it's real," played over and over in his mind. For the first time, he was forced to look inward, to truly confront the empty foundation upon which his entire identity had been built. He realized his apology wasn't the end of a chapter, it was the terrifying, uncertain beginning of a much harder one. A late-night emergency repair on the supercar's custom transmission kept them at the garage long after the city had gone quiet. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, with the scent of ozone and metal hanging in the air, the usual defenses between them seemed to melt away. It was just the two of them, working side by side in a comfortable, focused silence. This was the moment their fragile truce could become something more, the start of a true romance. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was helping, handing her tools, cleaning parts, actually making himself useful. He asked questions, not to challenge her, but to understand. He was fascinated by the intricate dance of gears and pistons, and even more so by the woman who understood their language so fluently. The unspoken connection between them was a current running through the quiet garage, a silent love story writing itself. In a moment of frustration with a stubborn bolt, Brenda let out a sigh and sat back on her stool. "My dad taught me everything I know," she said, breaking the silence. "He always said you can't fix what's on the outside until you understand how it works on the inside." She looked at him, and he knew she wasn't just talking about cars. It was a deeply emotional confession, an opening he had to honor. And for the first time, Earl spoke about his own life with raw honesty. He talked about the crushing expectations of his father, the loneliness of his wealth, the feeling of being a fraud in his own life. He admitted that the car crash was the best thing that had ever happened to him because it had forced him to stop. In the quiet intimacy of the garage, the arrogant heir disappeared, leaving only a man, vulnerable and lost. They shared a moment of genuine connection, a look that held more meaning than any of their conversations. He saw the flicker of compassion in her eyes, the recognition that his gilded cage was a prison nonetheless. And she saw past the boy who had humiliated her and the man who had insulted her, to someone who was trying, desperately, to find his way. This felt like the beginning of their destiny. As he watched her finally tighten the bolt, her hands moving with confident grace, a profound realization washed over him. His entire worldview, one that measured worth in dollars and power, was a lie. Real value was here, in this garage. It was in skill, integrity, and connection. It was a life-changing epiphany, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that he could never go back to the man he was before, a crucial step in his redemption. The air grew thick with unspoken words. The low hum of the garage's machinery was the only sound. In that shared silence, they both felt the shift. It was a point of no return. They were no longer just a rich man and a mechanic, or a bully and his victim. They were two people who had seen the broken parts inside each other, and for the first time, neither of them felt the need to run away. The fragile peace between them was shattered by a citywide announcement. Chambers Industries, his father's empire, was sponsoring the year's most prestigious event, the Metropolis Grand Prix, a high-stakes street race for custom-built cars. It was a spectacle of wealth and engineering, a playground for the rich and daring. Earl's father had already entered him, expecting him to win and bring glory to the family name, creating an instant drama. For Earl, the race was usually just another obligation, another trophy to be won. But this year, it felt different. The idea of returning to that world of superficial competition felt hollow after the genuine experiences in Brenda's garage. He felt a deep sense of dread, as if he were being pulled back into a life he no longer wanted. The race wasn't a game anymore, it was a test of his newfound character. Then came the plot twist. The list of official competitors was released to the public. And there, among the sons of billionaires and professional racers, was a name that made Earl's heart stop: Brenda McDonald. The car she had been so meticulously rebuilding, the one he had crashed and she had saved, wasn't just a repair job. It was her entry. It was a surprise so shocking it completely upended his world. Suddenly, everything clicked into place: her refusal to cut corners, her obsessive attention to detail, her deep knowledge of performance tuning. She wasn't just fixing his car, she was building a champion. A machine designed to compete against the very people who looked down on her world. This was her statement. This was her fighting back. This was her planned revenge, served on a racetrack. The news spread like wildfire through the city's racing blogs and social media circles. The mechanic versus the millionaire, one headline blared. Brenda instantly became the underdog hero, a symbol of working-class grit taking on the establishment. The public latched onto the narrative, turning the race into more than just a competition. It became a story of class warfare, a real-life rich man, poor woman showdown. The garage, once a neutral ground where their romance had started to bloom, was now a battleground in the making. She wasn't just the woman who was slowly capturing his heart, she was now his direct rival. The dynamic between them shifted in an instant, charged with a new, terrifying tension. Their burgeoning love story was now on a collision course with their professional ambitions. He confronted her, the list of racers displayed on his phone. "You're racing?" he asked, a storm of emotions swirling within him: admiration, shock, and a sliver of betrayal. Brenda simply looked at him, her eyes glinting with a fire he'd never seen before. "You're not the only one with something to prove, Earl," she said. The challenge had been thrown. The race for the trophy, and for their future, was on. The news of a common mechanic entering the Grand Prix, and being linked to his son, did not sit well with the elder Mr. Chambers. He was a man carved from ice and ambition, who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. To him, Brenda McDonald was a liability of the highest order, a smudge on the family's pristine reputation. Her presence in his race was an insult, and he would not let it stand. This was a drama he intended to end quickly. He decided to intervene, employing the only tool he knew: money. He visited Brenda's garage alone, his expensive suit a dark stain in her vibrant world. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He laid a cashier's check on her workbench, the amount on it large enough to be life-changing for anyone. It was a bribe, cold and simple, a business transaction designed to eliminate a problem. This was his version of a solution. "Every person has a price, Miss McDonald," he said, his voice smooth and venomous. "This is yours. Withdraw from the race and disappear from my son's life. He gets distracted. He needs to focus on winning, not fraternizing with the help." He framed the offer as a way to protect Earl, twisting the knife by implying that this was what Earl secretly wanted all along: a cruel and calculated move. Brenda stared at the check, then at the cruel, condescending face of the man before her. The hope that had been growing in her heart for weeks withered and died. Of course, it had all been a lie. Earl's apology, their late-night conversations, the connection she thought was real, it was just a game for the rich man to pass the time. This was the ultimate betrayal, a fresh wave of humiliation that dwarfed the memory from high school. She felt the full weight of the rich man, poor woman divide crush down on her. To them, she was nothing but an obstacle to be bought off, a problem to be solved. The elder Chambers' words were designed to inflict maximum damage, to make her believe that Earl was still the same arrogant heir she'd always known, and that she had been a fool to think otherwise. This was the most emotional and painful blow. The false defeat was absolute. The man she was starting to fall for was, in her eyes, complicit in this disgusting scheme. He had sent his father to do his dirty work. The dream of a second chance, of a real love story, evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of who they were. Her heart didn't just break, it shattered. And a shattered heart often seeks one thing: revenge. As Mr. Chambers turned and left, the silence he left behind was deafening. Brenda stood alone in her garage, the place of her greatest triumphs, feeling utterly defeated. The check on the workbench seemed to mock her, a symbol of everything she fought against. In that moment, all the progress she thought they had made, all the hope she had allowed herself to feel, turned to ash in her mouth. The betrayal was complete. Brenda's grief quickly curdled into a white-hot rage. She stormed out of the garage, the check clutched in her hand like a piece of poison. She found Earl at a high-society Parachi gala, a world she had no desire to be in. But she marched through the crowd of glittering elites until she stood before him. The look in her eyes was one of pure, undiluted betrayal. This was the ultimate confrontation, the climax of their personal drama. Without a word, she threw the check at his chest. It struck his tuxedo and fluttered to the floor. "I guess I should thank you," she said, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. "I was actually starting to believe you'd changed. I was starting to believe that what we had was real." The crowd around them fell silent, sensing the explosive and shocking scene unfolding. What one word describes this feeling of betrayal? "You're exactly the same cruel person you always were," she continued, her voice rising. "Hiding behind your father and your money. Was this your plan all along? Get close to your little rival, the girl you once humiliated, and then try to pay her off when she became an inconvenience. Was our connection just a lie?" Each word was a dagger aimed at his heart, a public indictment of his character. Earl stood there, utterly blindsided, the color draining from his face. He looked from the check on the floor to her heartbroken expression, and the pieces of his father's treachery clicked into place. But it was too late. The damage was done. From her perspective, he was guilty, and the evidence was lying at his feet. It was a devastating and public accusation, a true plot twist in their love story. "Brenda, wait," he pleaded, reaching for her, but she recoiled as if burned. "It's not what you think." But his words were lost in her pain. To her, he was just another rich boy making excuses, proving once again that their worlds could never truly meet. The hope for their romance felt like a naive dream she had allowed herself to have, and the awakening was brutal. "Stay away from me," she choked out, tears finally streaming down her face. "I'll see you at the finish line." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the center of the room, exposed and devastated. He hadn't just lost her trust, he had lost the one person who had made him want to be a better man. The path to redemption suddenly seemed impossibly steep, perhaps even gone forever. He watched her leave, the whispers of the crowd rising around him. For the second time in his life, he felt the sting of being publicly humiliated, but this time it was different. It wasn't his status being challenged, it was his very soul. He felt the weight of every eye in the room, but the only judgment that mattered was hers. And in her eyes he had already been condemned. The public humiliation was nothing compared to the private agony Earl felt. Brenda's words echoed in his head, the pain in her eyes seared into his memory. For a moment, the old Earl would have retreated, would have let the lie stand. But the man Brenda had inspired, the man he was becoming, would not. Fueled by a righteous fury, he left the gala and went to confront the true source of this disaster, his father. He found him in his study, calm and collected, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in his son's life. Earl didn't hold back. For the first time, he stood up to the titan who had controlled his entire existence. He accused him of being a coward, of using his wealth to destroy something real and good because he couldn't stand to see his son happy with someone he deemed unworthy. This was the ultimate family drama. The confrontation was explosive, a clash of wills that had been brewing for years. But this time, Earl didn't back down. He publicly defended Brenda's honor at a press conference the next day. He told the assembled media that Brenda McDonald was a brilliant mechanic and a formidable competitor who had earned her place through skill and integrity, not charity. It was a stunning, life-changing act of defiance. "She's my rival in this race, and I am honored to compete against her," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "But let me be clear, any attempt to undermine her, from anyone, is an attack on the spirit of this competition and an attack on me." He was drawing a line in the sand, choosing Brenda's honor over his family's pride, a move that sent shocking waves through the city's elite. His father was apoplectic, but Earl didn't care. He had made his choice. He announced that he would race fairly, or he would not race at all. This public declaration was a massive step in his redemption, a clear signal to Brenda and the world that he was not the man his father wanted him to be. He was fighting for her, even if she currently hated him and believed their love story was a lie. The media frenzy was immediate. "Heir defends mechanic, defies father," the headline screamed. His public stand transformed the narrative. He was no longer just the arrogant heir, he was a man of principle, publicly sacrificing his relationship with his powerful father for the sake of fairness and honor. This unexpected act of chivalry added a whole new layer of complexity to the upcoming race. He knew words weren't enough. He had to prove his loyalty through action. He had defended her name, but now he had to protect her from the shadows. His father's move was one of arrogance, but Earl had a sinking feeling that his old rival, Marcus Thorne, was still lurking and would not be satisfied with just a simple bribe. His fight was far from over, it had just entered a more dangerous phase. With his relationship with his father in ruins, Earl focused his energy on what he could control. He couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Thorne's jealousy wouldn't be satisfied with one failed attempt at sabotage. His father's stunt was cruel, but it was public. Marcus was a snake who preferred to strike from the shadows. Earl decided to use his own resources to investigate his so-called friend, fearing a more sinister form of revenge. He hired a private security firm, the best in the business, to discreetly look into Marcus's activities leading up to the race. He told them to check everything: his financials, his communications, his known associates. It felt dirty, using the tactics of his old world, but he wasn't doing it for power or leverage. He was doing it to protect Brenda. It was an act of penance on his path to redemption and true love. The investigators hit the jackpot. They uncovered a series of encrypted messages between Marcus and a disgruntled race official. The plan was far more sinister than before. It wasn't just about making Brenda look bad, it was about causing a catastrophic equipment failure at high speed. It was a plot twist that turned the high society drama into a potentially deadly crime. Marcus was trying to arrange a fatal car crash. The moment he read the report, a cold dread washed over Earl. He felt physically sick. The rivalry, the jealousy, the petty Gamesh had understood all that. But this was something else entirely. This was a descent into a darkness he hadn't thought Marcus capable of. The realization that he had once considered this man his peer was a deeply shocking and sobering thought. Armed with this terrifying proof, Earl didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. He spent the entire night before the race working tirelessly. He used his connections and a significant amount of his own money not as a bribe, but as a tool for Justice to acquire the best, most reliable components to replace every system Marcus had targeted. He was undoing the damage, piece by painstaking piece. He wasn't just buying parts, he was using his knowledge, the things he had learned just by watching Brenda, to understand the threat. He analyzed the schematics, cross-referencing them with the information from the investigators. The arrogant heir was gone, replaced by a man on a mission. A man determined to save the woman he loved from a danger she didn't even know existed. This was a life-changing night. He worked through the night, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to make things right. This wasn't about winning her back with a grand gesture. This was about keeping her safe. It was a quiet, thankless task performed in the shadows, the truest test of his changed character. He was finally using his power and privilege not for himself, but for her, hoping it was enough to earn him a second chance. Just hours before the race was set to begin, Earl arrived at Brenda's garage. He wasn't wearing a designer suit, but practical clothes, his hands stained with grease and his face etched with exhaustion. He wasn't there as a competitor or a former flame. He was there as an ally. In his hands, he held a tablet displaying the undeniable proof of Marcus's sabotage plot, and in a truck behind him were the replacement parts she needed. A final desperate gambit in their drama. He laid it all out for her, his voice steady and factual. He didn't make excuses for his father, but he clearly separated that act of snobbery from Marcus's potentially lethal revenge. "My father tried to buy you out, and that was unforgivable," he said. "But Marcus was trying to hurt you. I couldn't let that happen." He proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he was truly on her side. A pivotal moment in their love story. Brenda listened in stunned silence, her anger melting away to be replaced by a dawning, shocking realization. She had been so blinded by the betrayal she thought came from Earl that she had missed the real threat. She looked at the evidence, then at Earl's tired face, and saw the truth. He had spent the entire night not training for the race, but working to protect her. The surprise left her speechless. This was the ultimate proof of his life-changing transformation. He hadn't just apologized, he had acted. He had used his power, the very thing that had once defined their differences, to shield her. It was the most profound and heartfelt apology he could possibly have made, delivered not in words, but in selfless action. The hope for their future, which she thought was dead, sparked back to life. This was his true redemption. Her crew, who had been watching with suspicion, were now looking at Earl with a newfound respect. They saw the grease under his fingernails and the genuine concern in his eyes. Without a word, they sprang into action, a well-oiled machine, taking the new parts and beginning the frantic, last-minute work. Their silent acceptance was a powerful acknowledgement of Earl's change. There was no time for a long, emotional reconciliation. The race was about to start. But as her crew frantically began installing the new parts, Brenda walked over to Earl. She placed a hand on his arm, the simple touch conveying everything that words could not. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. It was an acceptance, a truce, and the promise of a second chance. He just nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. "Go win this thing, Rival," he said with a small, tired smile. They were still competitors, but they were no longer enemies. They were two people from two different worlds who had finally found common ground. As she climbed into her car, they shared one last look, a silent understanding that they would face what was coming, together, guided by destiny. The air crackled with the roar of engines and the thunder of the crowd. The Metropolis Grand Prix was underway. From the start, 3 cars pulled ahead of the pack: Brenda, a focused underdog; Earl, a man racing for more than a trophy; and Marcus, the venomous rival, his face a mask of rage. The drama was at its absolute peak, a high-speed ballet of ambition and vengeance, a spectacle of speed and fury. Lap after lap, they traded positions, a breathtaking display of skill and nerve. Brenda's car, now safe and perfectly tuned thanks to Earl, handled like a dream. She drove with a fierce, joyful determination. Earl drove with a calm precision, not just trying to win, but also acting as a silent guardian, keeping his car positioned as a buffer between Brenda and Marcus. Their romance was now playing out at 200 miles per hour. He could see Marcus getting more reckless, his driving becoming more aggressive and sloppy. He was losing, and he couldn't stand it. On the final lap, coming into the sharpest turn of the course, Marcus made his move. It wasn't a racing maneuver, it was a desperate, violent act. He swerved, aiming to clip Brenda's rear wheel and send her spinning into the wall, a final brutal act of revenge. But Earl had anticipated it. In a split-second, life-changing decision, he made a choice. Winning didn't matter. His reputation didn't matter. All that mattered was her. He floored the accelerator, not to pass her, but to shield her. He slammed his own car into Marcus's path, taking the full force of the impact himself. It was a sacrifice, a deliberate car crash to save her, the ultimate act of true love. The collision was spectacular. Both his and Marcus's cars were sent spinning off the track, out of the race. But Brenda's car shot through the turn unscathed. From her cockpit, she heard the screech of metal behind her and saw in her rearview mirror the spinning wreckage of her two rivals. The realization of what he had just done hit her with the force of a physical blow, a truly shocking and selfless act. The path was clear. She crossed the finish line in first place, the crowd erupting in a deafening roar. She had won. The underdog mechanic, the woman they all underestimated, was the champion. It was a stunning, triumphant victory, a fairy tale ending made real through grit and sacrifice. The surprise victory was hers, but the moral victory belonged to him. Her win was a testament to her skill, but it was made possible by his sacrifice. His act was the final, undeniable step in his redemption. He had given up his own victory to ensure hers, proving that his transformation was complete. He had lost the race, but he had won something infinitely more valuable. He had finally become a man worthy of her respect and her love. As Brenda was swarmed by reporters and cheering fans, her victory champagne still spraying in the air, her eyes searched the crowd. She saw him, standing near the wreckage of his car, a look of profound peace on his face. She pushed through the crowd, the trophy feeling meaningless in her hands until she could share the moment with him. The emotional peak of their entire journey was here, in the chaotic aftermath of victory. He met her halfway, the chaos of the celebration fading into a blur around them. He didn't care about the cameras or the questions being shouted. He only had eyes for her. This was his last chance, his moment to lay his heart bare and hope that his actions had been enough. It was now or never for their love story. He had to know if this was their destiny, if all the pain had led to this one perfect moment. "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with a genuine admiration that resonated deep in her soul. She just shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You saved me, Earl. You saved me out there." He smiled, a true, heartfelt smile. "You saved me first," he replied softly. "That night of the car crash, you didn't just save my life. You saved me from myself." A truly life-changing admission. And then, in front of the entire world, the arrogant heir pulled the victorious mechanic aside. He took a deep breath, his vulnerability a stark contrast to the man he once was. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," he began, his voice clear and strong. "But I have to. I'm asking for one last second chance. A real one. A chance at true love." The world seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't just a posterous interview, it was a public declaration, a final plea for redemption. The rich man was asking the poor woman not for forgiveness, but for a future. It was a plot twist more shocking than any race result, the ultimate culmination of their tumultuous romance, a scene no one could have predicted. The crowd watched, captivated. This was more than a race, it had become a public fairy tale. The story of the heir who had been humbled and the mechanic who had conquered had reached its climax. Every phone was raised, capturing the raw, unscripted moment, ensuring that this intensely personal declaration would become a legend, a viral testament to love and change. Brenda looked at the man in front of her, man who had been her tormentor, her customer, her friend, her rival, and her savior. She saw his entire journey reflected in his eyes. Without a word, she set down her trophy, stepped forward, and silenced his question with a kiss. It was a kiss that promised a new beginning, a final, beautiful chapter in their incredible story. In the end, it was never about who won the race. It was about the race to win your own soul. Earl and Brenda's story proves that sometimes you have to crash and burn completely before you can be rebuilt into the person you were always meant to be. It shows that a second chance isn't just something you're given, but something you have to earn, moment by painful, beautiful moment. Their love story is a testament to the power of redemption. If you also believe that no one is beyond saving and that true love is always worth fighting for, then you've found your community. This channel is a home for stories that prove the human spirit is unbreakable. So if that's you, make it official, subscribe, and join a community that believes in the power of a life-changing story. Now for the trifecta, hit the like button to spread this message of hope and redemption across YouTube. For our question of the day, what was the single most emotional moment in their story for you? Was it the betrayal, the sacrifice, or the final declaration? Let us know in the comments below. And finally, share this video with one person who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to change your life's direction. And while you wait for our next story, don't let the journey end here. Our channel is a treasure chest filled with powerful stories, just like this one. Explore our archives and discover other unforgettable tales of revenge, romance, and unlikely heroes. You never know what hidden gem you'll find. We are always searching for the next incredible story to share with you. And trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming. To make sure you're the first to see it, click that notification bell. It's the only way to guarantee you won't miss out on the next wave of emotions. We can't wait to see you again.